Good morning. I thank you all for having me. So, what I've prepared was I was going to give you an overview, let you know kind of what the country of Suriname is like, and also what I'm doing there now. And I will have my clock there. So, the country of Suriname is pretty small. The population, roughly 600,000 for the country, not for any city. So, if you are going to talk about, let's say, Suriname, what's it like there? Well, the weather is hot and humid, so if you complain about the weather here, on a particular day, this is a good description I heard, and I think that's what I'll use. When you complain about the weather here, that's what it's like all the time there. So, the days when everybody says it's miserable, that's the normal. It's not like we're not miserable, we're just used to being miserable. So, the seasons are rainy and dry, so you either get a lot of rain, and during dry, it normally does get dry. But never, forest fires aren't the common thing. It's very rare for it to get that dry. So it's also the weather's fairly nice because we have no real natural disasters that are common there. Tornadoes, hurricanes, even earthquakes are not common. Flooding does happen. Sometimes I'd almost not feel like putting that as a natural disaster because it's often due to the drainage not being maintained. It's a third world country, so yes. So we do suffer from flooding, but that's normally more of a technical issue, not so much nature is so bad. It's not like the other countries where you have mudslides and hundreds of people dying. It's more like people's houses are getting full of water and water damage indoors, that type of thing. So if you're going to talk about the animal life, if you really thought about America, you'd probably be surprised how many big animals you have here. If you thought about your bears, you do have the mountain lion, boars probably in some parts of the country. So our animals aren't that impressive. We have the jaguar, which is very similar to the mountain lion. In fact, if you take its stripes and spots off, it looks a lot like a mountain lion. And we have the same wild pigs, several varieties, tapir, sloth, if you've heard of that. That is there. And you have the caiman, which is like a little alligator. And you have I'm not sure if they're python or anacondas. I know we have pythons. I'm pretty confident about that. I don't know if we have the anacondas. And it's like the difference between a frog and a toad. So, yes. And then we also have the capybara, which is an oversized guinea pig. It's the world's largest rodent. I'm not exactly sure how large it gets, but I'm thinking maybe knee-high off the ground. But, think of like a guinea pig-shaped animal, but brown, and not necessarily super cute, somewhat stinky. What about insects? Insects, we have a nicely assortment. Beetles, we have a goodly supply. Every once in a while you'll be lucky and run into the ones that are like 3 inches long. That's not normal, too normal. But yes, you do run into those. Tarantulas, you run into sometimes. Again, it's like a 3 or 4 inch spider covered in hair. Large centipedes, they are in the country. I've seen preserved ones. I have not seen the large ones personally. And again, we're talking 3, 4, 5 inch centipede. Then again, you have large grasshoppers, large butterflies. If you think of the blue ones you've probably seen in pictures with reflective scales, those are seen on occasion in the country. So you have you have a butterfly flying through that looks like a bird. Not it flies different, but it's a big hunk of a butterfly. Butterflies and even some moths. So that's what we have. If you think of like the fish of the country, the dangerous ones would probably be things like piranhas, but they're not necessarily dangerous in all areas. Only specific areas of the country are they actually dangerous to humans. Piranhas, electric eels, stingrays, and again, it's more like localized. So it's not like where I live, you can't go down to the river and bathe safely. The only people I've heard about dying there are like from drowning. So, But also for people who, I don't know if anybody has had aquariums, but if you've had aquariums, you can also think some of the fish we have are things like guppy type of fish, tetra, and cichlids. So some of these aquarium type fish also live in the sometimes poorly maintained irrigation along the sides of the roads and also in the rivers. So that's kind of like what you'd see with that. If you think of plant, like what type of plant life would I see? So commonly grown plants would include all types of citrus and coconut trees, mango trees. If you're not familiar with a mango, it's a huge tree. I mean, I would want to say, I don't know, at least as big as a maple tree. So it's not a little tree. Mangoes, rambutan, I don't know if that rings a bell with anybody. Soursop, oxheart, cashew trees. They're more like large bushes. And then you'd often see people growing things like orchids or bougainvilleas in their yard. Anthurium, palm trees, those are, very common things to see growing around people's houses. The actual jungle itself looks different from our forest here. It's a little bit more aggressive, maybe what you'd see more in the south of the country where you have vines trying to climb up the trees and, the trees don't reach the ground, but the ground reaches the trees. And, a lot of the plants coming out of the ground, large leaves, shiny, waxy leaves. So you see a little bit more of that than like the weedy grass that we have here in the forest type situations. So if you were to think about the country industrially, it's a lot of people work for the government, and they might be, okay, you have the ones like teachers, police officers, firemen, that's, and then you have things like the National Bank, the National Water Company, National Electrical Company. So it's not like each area has their own electric company, their own water company. It is a national company that does the whole thing. Then you have like government departments and agencies like welfare, the upkeep of public properties. So a lot of people do work for the government. Then you have certain large companies in the country. So like they do a lot of gold work even now. And I should have looked up how many kilograms of gold they export per year, but I think it's, we're not talking about kilograms, we're talking about tons of gold exported. And oil, they have a big oil company, and that may, in the future, really expand. They found major oil reservoirs in their ocean. So this is like getting an outside company to come in and develop your oil for you because, it's deep water oil. So they used to have bauxite. Where I grew up, where I live now, was a bauxite mining company, which is aluminum ore. That company left, but that used to be a big thing. And I'm sure our country still has lots of bauxite. Large farms, especially things like rice, are grown on large farms, but most of it's grown for local use. And then you'll have average employees like you have in the US, but the standard of living is lower. So pay is lower, profits are lower. So, people working for stores and all types of stuff. In my town, where I live, you have a lot of people who either they work for the government, they work for a store, which is normally a very, low-paying job. There is a lumber company, but a lot of people, they'll either work their gardens, they'll have large gardens in the jungle where they cut the jungle and plant, or they will have, or maybe I should say, and they will have day jobs. So they might do this for a day, various jobs they can find around to make a living. So that's kind of what I've seen, a different, I wouldn't call it an industry, but it is part of the economy, would be illegal drugs. When container loads are found in various countries that the container came from Suriname and it has, thousands of kilograms of cocaine or whatever, it's ridiculous. So if you were going to talk about the government, how does the government there compare with, let's say, America? It's a very centralized government, so state government is not a huge thing there. There are governments over the various districts, It's not a state, it's a district, but they're normally very small. Everything's very centralized. And I would say the political situation is more tolerant and less polarized than it is here. I'm not saying we don't have the same rhetoric and the same fun stuff going on. We do. But because it's not just like two parties in the country, it's, well, if you were to count all the parties, I don't know if they could fit on, it might be more than 10. But, big parties, we're still probably talking, 4, 5, 6 big parties in the country. So it's not so, one end or the other. There's a lot more tolerance in that area. So it's a different environment. So what they'll do is they'll elect parliament, and then parliament, whoever gets the majority there, will normally work together with a different party, and then they'll form the government. So it might be 2 or 3 parties who are in control of the government, and then 2 or 3 parties who are in opposition, who they got seats but didn't win. So then that's more like what the political scheme is like. And with these parties, there's also many appointed positions. So the new government will get to appoint many people into various positions. The country is often said to be rather corrupt, and there's probably good reason for that. So, racial groups. You have a lot of people from India. They actually make the majority of the population. They're called Hindustani. And then we have Javanese, and then we have the black population where I work. And you also have small groups from other areas like Cuba, Brazil, China. I would say China probably comes, a little further up in the list. And, maybe a few Dutch, a few white people. In my town, it's unusual to see a white person. It's like, what's that white person doing in my town? You kind of forget that you're white too. Anyways. The religion, again, the people from India will have their religions. You've probably seen pictures of their idols. So that is very much in the country where you can see their idols around. I would say each of the groups have their traditional religion. Christianity is very popular, I would say, especially among the black population now. I think there was a lot of Roman Catholic background, and right now there's a lot of Pentecostal movement. So, especially if it comes to saying you're a Christian and going to church, that's very popular. Living like a Christian isn't. Those are two different things. So then what do I do in the country? So I'll talk about various things I'm involved in. So I'm really bad at dates. Somebody might actually correct me. But I'm going to guess like 6, 7 years ago. My dad opened a radio station, so I've been the one running that recently. And so mostly what I did was like the actual programming for the radio. So we're talking about like opening the application, programming the events for the day. That's often like a one-time job that you just kind of have to upkeep. Every once in a while we'll go in and switch things up, and that takes more work. But then also things like editing programs. So let's say we have a sermon in the church. That sermon might get edited, put on the radio so that it's a little bit, if any coughs, excessive noises from the congregation, and it's not like here where it's an enclosed building as much. You get a lot more outside noise. So anyways, you try to improve the quality, so you're not getting so much of the disturbances on the radio, and, putting that on the radio. Saving, putting on news, that type of stuff. So I also do some, it's not directly radio, but it's kind of related in recording music. Again, we're in a different language, a smaller society, so you don't have as many options as you do here in the U.S. In the U.S., you'll look and you'll find what you're looking for. There, that's not necessarily so. So, especially, in our group, to produce some of our own music, record sermons, Bible lessons, so I do that type of thing. Preaching in my church, I've been allowed to preach. I've been preaching, let's say, Wednesday nights. So I've been able to do that for some 2+ years. I also am involved with a music ministry, so I play for the church there. It's a little easier when you're used to the hymnal. And it's a significantly smaller one. It has like 160 songs. Of course, again, it's in a different language. So some of these songs come from English background. Some of them might even be, produced within the country, and some of them are from Dutch background. So it's actually a different set of hymns in some cases than like what's in this hymn book. I also work with a youth choir, which is telling the kids to behave themselves and sing. It's actually more than that. There is prep time, but being a director of a youth choir is a lot of, yes, that. Let's sing, guys. Stop playing around. So afternoon classes is also one of the things I do a lot of. That would be, let's say, the youth in the neighborhood. So it's not like people from the church. It's not like I'm running a youth group from the church, Christian families with a good amount of Christian kids. It's more like kids from the neighborhood. And we'll have them over. That we have 2 soccer fields on our complex, and soccer is the game there, it's the sport there. Basketball, that's you dribble with 2 hands and you hold the ball, hug it, and bulldoze your way through people. That's basketball. In other words, they don't play basketball. So soccer is the sport. A lot of people will come. They'll walk 10 minutes, 15 minutes. I don't pick anybody up, and you'll get 20, 30, 40 people coming to these classes. They're mostly coming for the ball, but you still get an opportunity to speak to them. So we normally have these various people over 4 days a week. 2 days we'll have 8 to 14-year-olds, and then 2 days of the week we'll have 14 plus, and some of them that come are older than I am. So let's say, I would say mostly under 30, but it's interesting. Also that ministry, so it allows you to reach out, and it also gives you things like public relationships. It allows you to, it's like a community service almost. So that really helps you, people like your ministry because you help their kids, and also helps reduce a little bit, the young guys. They're not bored. Bored people tend to get into trouble. So it helps the community, and it does, sometimes you do see fruit from that type of labor. A lot of them are hardened. Though sometimes you'll have the thing where they came to you, and eventually they get saved at somebody else's church. You still were a planter, even if you weren't the reaper, So that works. We also have Bible quiz with some of the kids from our church. That's 1 day a week. That takes a little bit more prep time. It's a little bit more intense, and it's a much smaller group. But you get a lot more involvement from the kids, where they're actually learning this material because they're actually, I don't know if you're familiar with Bible quiz, where you teach the class, then the kids study the questions, and then you actually have a competition where various groups in the class are competing against each other, who's faster at answering the questions. And it actually can get pretty fun. So that's a bit about the country. That's a bit about what I do. So are there any questions? I actually was trying to answer them all. Yes? Yes. So, in the Bible quiz, that is more of, and again, we're talking mostly unsaved, so it's not so much a discipleship class. Okay, so like with the Bible quiz, we're talking mostly, a lot of these classes, unsaved people. So it's not a discipleship class, it's a class where you're actually trying to bring salvation. That's often what it is. It's not that you won't touch any other subjects, but that's the predominant focus, is to get them interested in the things of Christ, and then after they're saved, you'll, in a separate class or time, disciple them. So specifically with the Bible quiz, it's straight out of the Bible. It's actually, we develop our curriculum as we go for some reason. It's a different language. So we often will go through either a topic in the Bible or we'll go through an actual text in the Bible. So we were working our way through the book of Mark, and we went all the way to Mark. We're at Mark, 7. So this is verse by verse. And so we've actually had some professions in that class, which has been good. We hope to see actual growth in the life of the kids. But the discipleship would normally take place in a different, maybe a one-on-one situation if there was a conversion. So the other classes, as I said, they're there to give you the opportunity, but they're not so much training for them. They're not there to train. If they at some point make a decision to follow Christ, then they're open to training. But up to that time, it's more like showing them that they need Christ.
First, I just want to thank you for coming here to share this. What's the language?
So the language, I speak Sranantongo, which is a very common language. The official language is Dutch, which I'm working on. And they also have various dialects. So there's a jungle dialect. One of them I can basically speak. I wouldn't know the entire vocabulary, but most of the young generation doesn't, so I'm not that far behind. Okay. Nainisanan Tongo, ano dewan problem. Dus me preki Nainisanan Tongo met takanga sama voor omgeving Nainisanan Tongo. In het Nederlands is het echt moeilijker, omdat ik ben niet zo gewend ermee. Maar het gaat toch. Okay, so that was 2 languages.
What did you say?
So I said, I preach in Srantongo. I talk to the kids in Srantongo, so that's not a problem. Dutch is a little bit harder. I'm not as used to it. But I can, it's still going better.
So I know the little bit of history, but tell for those that are new here, tell a little bit of history of where the Simeon Tongo Bible came from. That's part of your family.
So that was my grandfather on my mother's side. So when he came, there wasn't one of those Bibles yet. I would probably say his translation is still the best translation. There were other translations at the same time or close to that time. So he translated, he worked with some nationals, and he did it into Sranantongo. There have been translations since then into other dialects. His is probably one of the best ones as far as accuracy and the actual audience that can use it. It's a pretty good translation. It's what we use. I have one in my baggage.
Dr. Patton was not only a doctor, he was a neurosurgeon, and God let him down the Suriname, but they wouldn't let him live in the jungle if I was right.
Yes.
Because of his medical expertise, they wanted him close to the news, and but God used him, and he was him, and your dad and your uncles were involved in the input on the Bible as well. So it was a family run that they took the King James and translated it into the native tongue, and there were some changes as they were developing it too. I remember, Champlin was saying that he would listen to the preaching and say, wait a minute, that word doesn't really work. And so there was some revisions just to make sure that it was more accurate.
Mm-hmm.
They were very diligent and very successful.
It's fun when you translate. It is. Trying to get the exact word and trying to make sure the word you use is not just because you're an English person and it makes sense to you. Especially when your language is somewhat of a mixed language. So Sranantongo isn't like a language that goes back hundreds and hundreds of years. It's a mixture language, so it has English words in it, it has Dutch words in it, it has, I think, Portuguese, maybe French, some African language, even a little bit of Hebrew. So if you as an English speaker, a word makes sense to you, that you still want to make sure it makes sense to the general population because there are so many shared words. So. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. So, I did not mention birds. Why that didn't get on my list when I got all the way down to fish, but so the bird life will be very different from what you're used to here, in some ways similar. But we do have like macaws and mostly parrots that fly over. It's not really that impressive a sight because they're so far up, but you still hear them screeching as they go over. So you do have parrots flying over your yard, especially during certain seasons. They fly to various types of native trees. So you'll have them flying over your property one direction in the evening and maybe again in the morning or whatever, however their feeding patterns work. And you'll just hear them screeching as they go over, in a little flock, maybe 8, 10. The most popular pet, I would say, among the black population is probably a bird, at least the most valued pet. So dogs are dogs, but birds are pets. So especially songbirds. They specifically like songbirds, and they'll train them to sing. So the bird already can sing, but they'll actually train them to sing a specific song, and if their bird learns that song, all of a sudden it becomes very valuable. So like a guy my age, his most valuable possession might be a trained bird, and I mean literally most valuable possession, if he doesn't have a car. And even if he does, depending on what type of bird he has, it still might be more valuable than his car. So they carry their birds around, and I say they. I could say we. I'm in the same country, and I have a songbird. Unfortunately, my songbird doesn't impress anybody, but so they make a little cage about this tall, shaped like this, and you just carry it with you. They'll go to the store with it. They'll put it on top of their car as they chill. It's very much the thing to have. They also have a lot of parrots. Parrots, they don't train the same way. That's more like shove in a cage and keep at home. My uncle has a macaw that he lets roam around, an old grouchy macaw that has interesting things like hiding under cars so that it can bite people's feet. That backfired, though, when it got its tail run over. Anyways, so now I'm giving my opinion. Now it's an old, ugly, grumpy macaw. So went from a pretty grumpy macaw to an ugly grumpy macaw. Anyways, so it likes chasing. It doesn't chase people around, but if you go up close to it and it doesn't know you, And a macaw's a good-sized bird with a good-sized beak, that can make a good-sized pinch. And we've had some of those birds, and they'll chew through. I mean, if you use just a normal stick like you use for like a broom handle stick, I don't know if they use that here, they'll chew through that in just a couple days, if you try to use that as a perch. So they actually use hardwood for perches, so that your bird can't chew through it. You don't put it in a plastic cage.
How involved are you with helping hand drive that and such? I know your uncles go and deliver stuff. Do you deliver them as well?
So my Uncle Jonathan does most of it. I'm not really involved in her part of the ministry. I could just tell you, she did arrive again recently. She was in the States, I assume you know. She got a lot of operations done, and she's back in the interior last I heard, and I don't know if she's still there, but there was an intern that came down like the day I left. So I've gone down there a couple times, but I'm not really involved in her part of the ministry. Yes, so if you train it to sing, its value just goes it goes up ridiculously. So they can sell their birds at maybe the equivalent of $1,000 if it's a trained bird. And if it's really good, don't even ask how much they can sell it for. As I said, it can be more valuable than a car. So, to train it. So, birds can be stubborn. And they'll have interesting ways to try to train the bird. So what you try to do is get a young male singer. And the young one won't have completely learned its song yet. So you can change its song. The old ones tend to be set in their ways, and you can't change their song anymore. So they try to catch a young one that's untrained, and then they'll take a recording of a song, and they will play it for it 24 hours a day, or at least 12 hours a day, for months. But, ironically, reading up on the thing, in England, as far as I know, they used to train birds to sing, and they do it with a violin. And peasants would do it during winter, when they didn't have to work, and they would play their violin to the bird for a couple months and train it to sing, to whistle certain songs. I mean, man-made songs. So, they'll train their birds to sing, and then they can also use them to compete then, if their bird can outsing a different bird, and they'll do it for money. So, if my bird wins today, I'll get 1,000, let's say that, or 200 US, or whatever the price they set at, whoever's bird wins the competition. They'll do that type of thing. Again, but that's the high quality birds, not mine.
You said there's 600,000?
Yes.
Or are you in a city somewhere?
I'm in a town, it's not a village, it's a town, estimate 10,000.
So you have a church there?
Yes.
And then what kind of outreach do you go out? Door knocking?
So, I haven't gone out door knocking recently. I tend to use tracts. As I said, we have the radio and we have the various youth things. There are a lot of churches, just not Baptist. As I said, Pentecostals, there's lots of them. Roman Catholic, a little bit. So it's not like we never got door knocking. We have gone out door knocking. We've gotten a couple people that way.
So is there a lot more Baptist churches there than Missionary?
In our town, no. We are the Baptist church in our town.
How effective, your own personal observation of the radio program? I know your dad is passionate and setting it up.
Mm-hmm.
How has that affected as far as the church? Have people commented on it? Has there been any response that positive towards the radio program?
There's been a little bit of a response. Part of the reason we don't get more feedback is because we don't have a contact information, because I'm the only one at that time who was running it. And I don't want people calling me on my phone, just the general public. There wasn't somebody set aside for handling that type of information. So normally what you do hear is just people on the street saying, hey, I was listening to your programs, really enjoy it. That type of thing is what you hear. We don't actually, because we haven't set up that type of thing, we don't get our entire audience, whatever that is, feedback from them. So occasionally I'll get, somebody saying, yeah, I enjoy your.
People replied by attending church and such because of the radios?
I'm not sure if anybody's come directly because of that. But that doesn't mean it's not. So, for example, as I said, there's a wide range of church people. So they may be going to their church and listening to your station. So you're feeding a different church's flock, which is okay. I'm okay with that. Because any way you teach and reach out to people is a good way. Because just like if you have various people in America who listen to Christian radio, you wouldn't necessarily go to their church and leave yours. But that still helps your Christian growth. So we do get that type of response. But again, it's more like, hey, you're on the radio, aren't you? Yeah, I recognized your voice. It's that type of response, because I haven't put, a telephone number out there, because I haven't wanted to handle, I don't know what, but I don't want to get called all through the day by people I don't know.
So how many people in the town that you're in right now?
About 10,000.
So do you guys go to other towns, like another church anywhere else?
So during the years past, there has been that type of things. And there was local leadership of some of the other churches. A lot of the, people are older now. So like the missionaries I work with, they're older. So that hasn't been the recent ministry, but that was part of the ministry, especially.
I'll interrupt, fill in some of the blanks. Their planting of churches often comes with conflict because as soon as, and I'm just going to be critical as it is, as soon as a successful Baptist ministry is planted, the Pentecost try to come in and take it over. And because they don't, I'm sorry, they don't reach, they take others. And unfortunately, that's had benefits to us over the last 2 decades that I've been here, hearing from your uncles and your dad, is that the struggle is the sound doctrine that is taught in their churches is often set aside for music and for the Pentecostal way. And so it is a challenge to not only get someone to preach the word, but preach the word in sound doctrine. That's definitely a challenge.
What you're saying is they need more missionaries to go there.
Not exactly. You need, people called of God, even locally. But, it's been hard, and the culture is really hard for them. You feel, I didn't have to go through what a lot of them go through. I mean, the culture is ridiculously evil. Yes?
Getting the word into the hands of people, they have Bibles there to give out,
S-
and have something there to instruct.
So, the Bible as a book is there. They can get their hands on it. It's basically affordable to the entire population, whoever wants it. And we've gone through the Bible we translated that's being printed, and it's sold cheaply. So, it's, thousands of them have been sold. And I don't know. We had to kind of slow down recently because it needs to get printed again. So I don't know if it was like 100, 200 a month that were getting sold. And not just locally. People will buy them and then take them to sell them in other areas of the country.
So do they use the Bible that is
A lot of people do. There are other translations, but a lot of people use ours. As I said, we're talking maybe 100 to 200 a month. And I'm not saying we go up to 200. I'm saying somewhere in that range, maybe sometimes less. They use it. Yes. It's not like ours is the only one used by all churches, but yes, even the Pentecostals use it. Yes, that was recent. The problem, the reason for that, I haven't heard that there's been any. We don't know why. We just know that it happened 2 days ago or 3 days ago.
Several years ago, there was a talk that they distributed like single channel radios. Is that still being used or out or anything like that?
It was done at that time. Due to various things that happened, it didn't keep on going. But it did happen. And sometimes we still have some still in storage, and those will get, what we do is we sell them cheap. That way people won't just misuse them. So they'll get sold cheap, and people who actually want to listen to the radio, or it also has the audio Bible on it, then they'll come get it from us. And again, it's very affordable, but you don't want every kid in the neighborhood coming over and asking you for a free toy, because that type of thing will happen where if you give out something free, it'll get trashed.
I have one more question, and then we'll go ahead and put it down.
You get up and down the river very often?
I did not grow up on the river, so I've only been on it a handful of times.
Time went by.
It did.
He wasn't sure we'd be able to get 45, 50 minutes. Here it is, 10 minutes still. And that is our missionary. And he was raised on the field, and God, his unique perspective of living there his entire life gives him an insight that you or I would struggle. We did have a family some years ago, the Rasmussens. They went down there. The problem is Bob had a hearing problem, and so it caused him to struggle to learn the Suriname language. And he ended up leaving the mission field and he went from the equator to the sub-zero up in the Arctic and up in northern Canada, and doing a work up there. But missionaries, that's one of the prayers that Dr. Patton is now off the field because of age, and his dad is working in a different ministry. His uncle is there. His other uncle is in the bigger city. But that's one of the prayers that I hear on their prayer request, is that God, not just a missionary, but a God-sent, God-burdened family that would be burdened to learn the language, learn the culture, and reach out with the gospel message. And they don't want just someone to come in. They want someone to come in that will be effective for the country, and so they're very particular. And I don't have a problem. They're not saying no one's welcome. They're just saying those that are coming, they want to make sure that they have a burden for the Suriname people, and which is a multicultural. So we just pray for Silas, and he'll be heading back the 1st of August, so he's going to go back down this week to see his mom in, North Carolina? Tennessee. Oh, okay. I wasn't sure where she was at anymore. So she's in Tennessee, and so then from there, then he'll be heading back down to Suriname here in this next couple of weeks. And so you pray for him. He'll share with us and preach this afternoon in the afternoon service. I just couldn't give up the pulpit, and so, but great to hear from him. Let's have a word of prayer, and we'll be dismissed. Father, thank you for your love. Thank you for the report that you've allowed to be given. We thank you for the productivity that Silas and his family have been part of for generations in the Suriname area and the surrounding countries. Lord, that the gospel would go forth. We thank you for their diligence, their prayerful consideration, and their outreach, even into their community. So bless now this time together, and Lord, prepare our hearts for the message to follow in Jesus' name. Amen. All right.